Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Metty Agustine Primary. Today I'm going to talk about goals and objectives that is taken from James Dan Brown's book in 1995. Here is the outline of the presentation. The first is definition of goals and objectives. The second is writing objectives. The third is tips in writing objectives, and the last, examples. Before knowing the definition of goals and objectives, we have to remember again the concept of needs analysis that has been discussed in the previous chapter. The systematic model of curriculum development starting with the need analysis and contextual analysis, moving on determining the goals and objective, content, process, and assessment. All components are evaluated in program evaluation. So based on Brown, needs analysis will become the source of the formulation of program goals and objectives. Program goals are general statements concerning desirable and attainable program purposes and aims based on perceived language and situation needs. And instructional objectives, they are specific statements that describe the particular knowledge, behaviors, and or skills that the learner will be expected to know or perform at the end of a course or program. The 4 points that we have to remember in deriving goals, they are general statements of the program's purposes. They should usually focus what the program hopes to accomplish in the future and particularly on what the students should be able to do when they leave the program. The third, they can serve as one basis for developing more precise and observable objective. And the last, they should never be viewed as permanent or perceived needs may change. It means that the main reason for this last point is that the needs being addressed are only perceived needs and such perceptions may change. In fact, actual changes can occur in both language needs and situation needs if new different types of students enter the program. Now, let's see about the goals or objectives. We have here the 4 statements that can be categorized as goals and objectives. Let's see together. By the end of the course, the students will be able to 1. Understand conversational English. 2. Correctly underline sentences that function as examples within 600 words. Passages of the 11th grade reading level on general science topics 3 out of 4 times. 3. Develop oral language skills that will prepare them to participate in class discussion, make oral presentations before an audience, and respond to questions, as well as continue to improve through self-evaluation of speech. And the 4th, find and write down the library call number for 10 books found in the card catalog when supplied with only the author and title with 90% accuracy. So here we have 2 goals and 2 objectives actually. Number 1 and number 3, they are goals. Number 2 and number 4, they are objectives. Why? Let's see the answer in the next slide. We can answer the previous slide when we know how to distinguish between goals and objectives. The first, we have to consider about the level of specificity. That is the single most distinguishing characteristic between goals and objectives. And the second one, in distinguishing between goals and objectives, we should remember the trick is to decide whether the statement is closer to the general or specific end of the continuum. In the figure, we can see here in the left side, there is the goals, and the right side, there is the objective. The circle of the goals, when we have the statement which is going to be closer to the goals, it means that categorized as goals. And when we have the statement that is closer into the specific one, so we can call as the objective. Another point that we have to know when we want to develop the objectives is about sources of ideas of objectives. There are 3 kinds of sources here. The first is other language programs. In other language programs, it involves such as similar program or the previous program that can be followed up by us as a teacher or developer of the curriculum to continue the same program. And the second one, for example, a clearinghouse for language teaching objectives. In this book, Brown said that the example is from the International Objectives Exchange in Culver City, California. And the third, it can be from our college. Our college can reflect us how the process of curriculum development, especially regarding to the developing of the objectives. It seems like the reflection of practice in curriculum development. The second is the literature. Brown said there are many books and articles that can be referred here. The first is Steiner in 1975, talks about the book is an objective. And when we want to know about the books on curriculum development, we can use the Finocchiaro and Bromfield and also Noonan. And when we want to know the objective to teach communicative competence, we can read about Finlay and Nathan, and also the article on listening comprehension from Richards. And the last book for the Council of Europe from Van Eck and Alexander in 1980. But it does not mean that today we only refer to these books. We can also find out many other books in internet. They are very available nowadays. Then we can develop our objectives also based on the situation today or nowadays, which is relevant. And the last, the sources can be involved in taxonomies. In taxonomies here, Brown offered the Bloom's cognitive and affective domain, and the second one from Bennett's taxonomy of reading objective. Let's discuss about cognitive and affective. Cognitive domain refers to the kinds of language knowledge and language skills of the students that will learn in the program. In language learning context, so cognitive domain will refer to the language goals, that is the language learning content of the program. And dealing with the affective domain, it refers to those aspects of learning that are related to feelings, ambitions, degrees of acceptance, values, biases, and so forth. We can know that in our curriculum today in Indonesia that the affective domain has been implemented in our syllabus and into our objectives learning. In Bennett's taxonomy, it offers a cognitive and affective domains also, and in its program, especially this was designed for ESL reading objectives in literal of comprehension, reorganization, inferential comprehension, evaluation, and also appreciation in the reading class. Now, let's say before developing the objectives, we should know the components of objectives themselves. From makers in 1975, there are three essential components of objectives. The first is performance, the second conditions, and the third criterion. When we talk about performance, it relates to what the learner will be able to do, and conditions refers to the important conditions under which the performance is expected to occur, and the criterion, it refers to the quality or level of performance that will be considered acceptable. For example, here there is the objective that can you decide whether which one performance, condition, and criterion? So let's discuss together. By the end of the course, the students will be able to write the full forms of selected abbreviation drawn from pages 6 to 8 of the course textbook with 80% accuracy. Talking about the performance, so the performance will relate to the students will be able to write the full forms of selected abbreviation. What about the condition? The condition is drawn from pages 6 to 8 of the course textbook. And the criterion relates to the phrase with 80% accuracy. Let's see another components of objectives that Brown's called as sound instructional objectives. There are 5 here, 5 components that Brown suggested. The first is subject, second performance, the third condition, the fourth measure, and the last criterion. When we see the components here, actually they are similar with the measures, but the difference is only Brown put subject and measure. Okay, subject will cover the students, learners, or workshop participants. Performance will refer to the what learners can do. Conditions refers to the clarification of what it means to perform. Measure refers to the how the performance will be observed or tested. And the last criterion refers to the level of accuracy that will be considered sufficient to succeed. This is also the example for the objectives that is developed based on Brown's model. Given an oral statement containing spatial direction, students will identify the space indicated on a map, diagram, chart, or graph by answering in written form and an oral questions about what is located or written in that space with 80% accuracy. What about the subject? The subject is students. What about the performance? Performance is will identify the space indicated on a map, diagram, chart, or graph. What about the condition? Condition by answering in written form and oral questions about what is located or written in that space. What about measure? Measure relates to the given an oral statement containing spatial direction. And the last criterion with 80% accuracy. And I do believe when we can develop the kinds of objectives using the perception or the model such as Meggers and Brown, so the teaching learning process will be achieved well. The students will be assisted to reach the target of learning, especially in learning language. Now, we have the types of goals and objectives. Based on Brown, there are three kinds of goals and objectives. The first is language and situated centered. In language and situated centered means that the goals or objectives will refer to the use of the language based on the situation given. For example, here, the students will learn how to fulfill out forms in French, read menu, and order a meal. So, the language that will be used will relate to the restaurant, getting the order, the menu on the menu of meals or beverage, and in the restaurant. What about the functional? The second one relates to the use of language based on the function of the language itself. So the students will be able to converse in social German with a focus on greetings, conversational openers, polite rejoinders, and verbals. Functional will also relate to the social function when they have the conversation or communication orally. The last is structural goals. In structural goals, it is close to the term of linguistic or the language system that the students learned. So here, the students learn the grammatical system of French. Now, to make our goals and objectives better, we have to know the tips. Here, there are 4 tips. The first is examine the needs of the students as discovered and presented in the needs analysis documents. The second, state the needs of the students in terms of realizable goals for program. Third, narrow the scope of the resulting goal statement by analyzing them into their smallest units, by classifying those units into logical groupings, by thinking through exactly what it is that the students need to know or be able to do to achieve the goals, and the last, state the smaller, more specific goals as objectives with as much precision as makes sense in the context. Now, I tried to develop my own instructional objectives from the goal that is taken from the curriculum 2013 for the junior high school students. Here is the goal. At the end of this learning program, students understand and use basic communication in English, both oral and written. So I developed into 2 kinds of instructional objectives related to the speaking and writing skills. The first, through role play, students are able to communicate orally using the English expression of greetings with 80% accuracy, grammar, appropriateness to content, pronunciation, and fluency. The second one, students are able to greet their pal friends through email with 85% accuracy. It relates to the vocabulary, grammar, spelling, organization. And when I develop these objectives, I do believe with the models that has been discussed previously, especially from Brown, sounds instructional objectives. And I do believe when this is implemented, it will make us easy to decide whether the process of our learning will be successful or not. All right, now we come to the conclusion at, and this is the end of my presentation. Objectives view as flexible, temporary, and revisable. Objectives can provide a useful tool that allows teachers to work out. Objectives are a central part of any systematic curriculum development. Objectives can be creative, and without goals and objectives, a program may have no clear purpose and direction. Okay, thank you very much. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.